Move on to this now. Top jurists are being interviewed this week for vacant positions at various superior courts around the country. They'll appear before the Judicial Service Commission in Sandton, Johannesburg. Last year, the JSC came under scrutiny for how it handled its Chief Justice interviews, and now it appears they'll try set that right.
The judicial system plays an integral part in the democracy of a country and upholding a constitution, and those that are tasked with ensuring the top jurists are appointed to the benches of the country have a really huge responsibility. The Judicial Service Commission is tasked with that specific objection, and they are set to sit here for the rest of the week, appointing and interviewing shortlisted candidates for some of the appellate and the higher and superior courts of the country, including the Constitutional Court. They have faced a criticism over the years with the handling of this interview process, with some criticism coming towards certain of the commissioners, as well as the manner in which the interviews were being held. Some legal analysts have accused them of having no consistency in the manner in which interviews were taking place.
One of the loudest criticisms that we've heard about the JSC is just the inconsistency in how it performs its job of interviewing candidates. We've seen over the years a fluctuation of the issues that are taken up. Some of them are irrelevant towards finding out whether someone is suitable to be a judge. Others are really an opportunity for the politicians or the lawyers to sort of bring in other issues that are not related to the process. And so that has been the biggest criticism, and there have been members of the JSC that have been singled out for criticism, people like Limpopo, Julius Malema, and others. But what we've seen now and coming into this session is a commitment by the JSC to change. We've seen that they've set aside today to discuss the mandate of the JSC, and that's important because it's an opportunity for the JSC to reflect on what has happened over the last few years and to change the way it does things.
Thank you so much. That was Judges Matters and Mbekezeli Benjamin speaking to us here at the Hilton in Sandton, Johannesburg, where the Judicial Services Commission is hosting a week of interviews.
All right, you saw him on that clip there with Hasina Gori, but he joins us now to expand a little more further on these interviews that are being handled by the JSC this week. That's Mbekezeli Benjamin, Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer. Mbekezeli, thank you so much for your time. Lots of criticism. Of course, we saw this even from your organization during the interviews for the candidates of Chief Justice. It's a big week for the JSC because these interviews are going to also be critical when it comes to, those posts that need to be filled in those superior courts. I wonder, what will you be looking out for?
Well, good evening, Bonyo, and to the viewers at home. The biggest thing that we as Judges Matter will be looking out for is a sign that the JSC is taking lessons from what has happened in the past. We are hoping that the JSC is really committed to the change that they promised us. One of the big things that we hope will come out of today's sessions was a discussion on the type of criteria that should be set in terms of determining the suitability of candidates to be judges. And we understand that they will not make the announcement. We were hoping that by the end of today, they will make an announcement on what is the way forward. But I think we'll hear it during the course of the next few days.
And you've also made your own proposals when it comes to some of, the work that needs to unfold going forward. I mean, some of what you've said is you've looked into the criteria. You've also looked into the conduct of commissioners and made some proposals in that regard. Let's start with the criteria and talk about the proposals that Judges Matter has made in this regard.
So the Constitution, as it's currently framed, it has a very vague criteria on what it needs for you to be a judge. The first requirement is that you must be fit and proper. Then the second one is that you must be appropriately qualified. There's no real expansion of what that means. So what we are saying is that the JSC should be sitting down and thinking, what does it mean for someone to be appropriately qualified? What kind of experiences must a person have in order for them to be ready to be a judge? What kind of qualifications must they have studied? Is it enough to only have studied a simple law degree and never have gone on to do postgraduate studies or to do any kind of certificate? We also need to look at the kind of track record that someone has had. If you, for example, have been teaching at a university for 20 years, what kind of experiences do you bring to the bench that may be different from someone who's been a magistrate or who's been an attorney? So those are the kinds of things that the JSC should interrogate. The other important thing is the kind of values that a person must have. You know, when you are sitting there as a judge, you have certain prejudices. For example, if you come from a wealthy family, you might not understand how poverty affects someone, how someone falls into debt and has their house repossessed. So those are the kinds of questions that the JSC should be asking to find out if the person has the values that they need to preside in our courts.
And I wonder then, how far will, that go when you look at the kind of value system that one has, at the same time juxtaposing it with some of the questions that could potentially come up, because we've seen even some questions that an organization like yourselves have argued that simply did not belong, in this interview process. I wonder, when it comes to the conduct of the commissioners themselves, what are some of the things that the JSC really needs to tighten here? Because the process really did come under scrutiny, and seeing some of the questions that were even disallowed at some point.
So we think the criteria point is only a starting point. And of course, we are not saying that the commissioners must now have set questions that we know that each and every interview, they'll ask the same questions. We are not saying that. We are saying that the criteria should focus the minds, should guide the kind of conversations that is had. And then in terms of the conduct, the commissioners on the JSC do not sit there for their own sake. They do not represent their own jackets. They represent members of the public, if they are public representatives. They represent the legal profession, if they are practicing lawyers. They also represent teachers of law, the university professors. So when they sit there, they have to make sure that they advocate or they represent the views of the particular constituency that they come to. So a code of conduct will help in making sure that a commissioner stays in line. It will make sure that the particular commissioner doesn't use the TV cameras that will be focused on the JSC, doesn't use that opportunity to sort of push their own agendas that are not related to the job of finding out whether people are ready to be judges.
I don't want to be a spoil sport, but I can't help but ask you this question, because it's still day one, but I cannot help but ask, how concerned are you that we might find this process, if it's not done correctly, back in court and having to be redone, like we saw with the Chief Justice interviews?
Well, it is a concern that we have, but I think we have received so many positive signs from the JSC that it's not a concern that is really at the front of our mind. We, like coming into today's day, for example, the JSC itself committed to having a full day where they will discuss their own mandate. That is a positive sign that the JSC is committed to change. Of course, Justice Zondo, as Chief Justice, also has his own element that he adds, because we remember that in October, he was the chairperson of those interviews, and he managed to steer the JSC towards a more dignified, a more respectful, a more focused process. So that is also a positive sign that we expect will happen in this round. Of course, we're hoping that the JSC will have this criteria that we're speaking about. And if they don't have it, it might make them vulnerable to those kinds of court challenges. And we hope that they will avoid that situation at all costs.
All right, let's see if they do manage to avoid it, Mbekezeli, and we, of course, will continue to track these interviews and hopefully speak to you when they wrap up, just to get a sense of, what do you make of some of the candidates that we've seen. That's Mbekezeli Benjamin, Judges Matter Research and Advocacy.